In 2014, scientists gave people a choice. Sit alone in a room with nothing but your thoughts, or press a button that would deliver a painful electric shock to your own body. Most people chose the shock. One man shocked himself 190 times in 15 minutes, just to have something to feel. Think about the last time you experienced true silence, not the quiet of a library, not the muffled hush of 3 a.m., real silence. The kind with no traffic, no hum of appliances, no distant voice, no notification, no soundtrack curated to make you feel something manageable. Can you remember it? Most people can't. And when researchers actually place people inside an anechoic chamber, a room engineered to absorb 99.9% of all sound, something happens almost immediately, something that nobody predicted when they first built these rooms. People start hallucinating within minutes, without any drugs, without any psychological predisposition. The brain, starved of external input, begins generating its own. Phantom sounds, voices, music that isn't playing. One engineer who tested the quietest room on Earth said he heard his own nervous system, his own blood moving through his skull. He lasted 45 minutes before he had to leave. And that was a professional, someone who wanted to be there. But here's what that experiment doesn't tell you. The hallucinations aren't the strange part. The strange part is what happens before them in the first few minutes. Before the brain starts fabricating sound, there is a window. A brief, unbearable window where the person is left alone with only one thing: themselves. And that, apparently, is worse than the hallucinations. In the University of Virginia study, the one with the electric shocks, participants weren't in sensory deprivation. They weren't isolated. They were just asked to sit quietly and think for 6 to 15 minutes. No phone, no book, no task, just thought. 67% reported that it was an unpleasant experience, not boring, not inconvenient, unpleasant. And nearly a quarter of the participants chose physical pain over mental silence. Think about that architecture for a moment. The human mind, the most complex object in the known universe, finds its own company so intolerable that it will hurt itself to escape. This is where everything changes. Because that study wasn't measuring boredom, it was measuring something far older. In 1654, the French mathematician Blaise Pascal wrote something that has never stopped being true. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. He wrote that 370 years ago, before smartphones, before television, before the radio, before the printing press had fully saturated European culture with noise. He was watching people in the 17th century desperately flee silence, into gambling halls, into wars, into obsessive work, into religious frenzy, and he saw what they were actually running from. Not boredom, themselves. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part is what neuroscience found when it finally caught up to Pascal. When the brain enters silence, real silence, the kind where there's nothing to react to, nothing to process, nothing to optimize, a specific network activates. Scientists call it the default mode network. It fires up when you stop doing things. When you stop being useful? When the world stops demanding your attention? And what does it do in that silence? It turns inward. It begins to evaluate, to compare, to replay, to anticipate everything that could go wrong, to reconstruct every embarrassing memory in high definition, to simulate rejection, failure, irrelevance. The default mode network is, in many ways, the neurological home of suffering. And silence is its invitation. And this is the part almost nobody talks about. We didn't stumble into a noisy world by accident. We built it, deliberately, systematically. We constructed an entire civilization whose primary function, whatever else it claims to do, is to ensure you are never left alone with the contents of your own mind. Every notification is a tiny escape hatch. Every autoplay feature, every infinite scroll, every algorithm that knows what you'll click before you do, these aren't accidents of engineering. They are precision instruments designed around one fundamental insight. Humans will pay almost anything to avoid silence. The average person now touches their phone 2,617 times a day, not to accomplish something, not because they're bored in any classical sense, but because the alternative, the 3-second gap between stimulation and re-stimulation, contains something they've learned through years of quiet terror to avoid. And here's the cruel irony buried inside all of it. The more noise we consume, the lower our tolerance for silence becomes. Every time you reach for your phone, the instant a quiet moment arrives, you are training your nervous system to experience silence as a threat. You are literally rewiring the threshold at which your brain sounds the alarm. The noise doesn't calm the anxiety, it feeds it. So the next time you feel that restless, nameless itch, that low-grade agitation that appears the moment you have nothing to do, understand what you're actually feeling. That's withdrawal. This was never really about silence. Silence is just the mirror. What we're actually talking about is the modern human's nearly complete inability to be present with the experience of being alive, unmediated, unenhanced, unaccompanied by 1,000 engineered distractions designed to make that experience feel insufficient. Every ancient contemplative tradition understood this. The Zen monks with their enforced silence. The desert fathers of early Christianity who fled into the wilderness specifically to confront what lived in the quiet. The Sufi mystics, the Stoics, the Buddhists with their 1,000-year obsession with the still mind. They weren't running from the world, they were running towards something the noisy world makes impossible to find. Because here's what actually lives in the silence when you stop running long enough to find out. Not the anxiety, not the shame spiral, not the default mode catastrophizing. Those are just the lobby, the guardians at the gate. The things your brain conjures to turn you back before you go too deep. What lives past them, what the monks and mystics and philosophers kept returning to at great personal cost, is something that doesn't have a clean name in modern language. The Japanese call it ma, the fertile emptiness, the pause between notes that makes music possible. Without it, there is only noise. And noise, however loud, however constant, however carefully curated to make you feel alive, is not the same thing as living. So the question isn't whether you hate silence. You do. Almost everyone does. The research is clear, the neuroscience is settled, the history is undeniable. The question is what you're protecting yourself from when you reach for the noise. Because whatever it is, whatever thought, whatever feeling, whatever unbearable truth waits for you in the quiet, it has been waiting a very long time. It waited through every notification you ever answered to avoid it. Through every show you put on at midnight, not because you wanted to watch it, but because you needed the room to not be silent. Through every conversation you had just to hear a voice. Through every song you played to fill a space that had gotten too honest. It waited. And here's what nobody tells you about the thing you've been running from your entire life. It isn't trying to destroy you. It's trying to tell you something. And until you sit in the silence long enough to hear it, you will keep running. And the world will keep selling you better places to hide,